In the middle of the Washington desert, where the wind whispers across empty plains and the Columbia River cuts through the dust, there's a place that the maps once tried to forget.
A place built in secret, guarded by barbed wire, silence, and fear.
Entire towns vanished almost overnight. Families were told to leave, no questions asked.
And in their place rose a strange new city, one that never appeared on postcards, one that didn't officially exist.
Something powerful was being created out there, something that would change the world forever.
But power always has a cost, and some prices are still being paid.
Even now, the ground hums with a secret it's not ready to release.
And to help us uncover what really happened in this stretch of desert between Vantage and Richland, we're joined by someone who spent years piecing together the truth.
Theater professional, writer, historian, and Pretty Gritty Tours guide, Ellicia Elliott.
She's taking us deep into the heart of Washington's most haunting mystery.
So grab your Geiger counter
And let's fall down the rabbit hole.
History is not boring, unless you're doing it wrong.
Welcome to Rainy Day Rabbit Holes, where the West gets wild and so do we.
I'm Shea.
And I'm Jody.
Let's fall down the rabbit hole. So, Ellicia, we are so excited to have you on the show. Can you tell our listeners a little about yourself and how you got into history and tour guiding?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is really exciting because I've been listening to your podcast for a while. And so it's pretty cool to be able to be here and talk to you as in person as we can across the state. So my background is actually in theater, and part of that includes dramaturgy, which is a big fancy word for like researching for plays. So if you're going,
I'm thinking metallurgy.
Yeah, no.
Nothing to do with metallurgy.
Yeah. So like, for example, one of the first shows I researched was my junior year in high school. We did Fiddler on the Roof in a not very Jewish area of Washington State. But my dad's best friend was Jewish, and it was really important for me to have everyone on the same page about why are we singing the Sabbath prayer like this? Why are these hand actions important? And so I just researched the history of the play and Jewish traditions like crazy to make sure that we were doing things accurately. And then as a teacher, I've done theater for most of my adult life, and I was a teacher for 15 years, and I taught middle school and high school language arts and theater arts, but history has to be part of that as well.
Absolutely.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah, with the different books I taught, like my favorite book is To Kill a Mockingbird. And if you don't teach any history along with teaching the book, you're totally doing the book and your students a disservice. Of Mice and Men, anything with Shakespeare, right? And so I actually considered when I was getting my undergrad whether to do a theater and history teaching major or a language arts and theater teaching major. And I eventually went with language arts, but I've always been a fan of history, very passionate about learning all aspects of it. And so I was able to use that part of my brain as a teacher. And then as an artistic director, I ran a Shakespeare theater company for 10 years. But then COVID happened and kind of ruined all sorts of things, and including me having to leave my position with my own theater company because I was considered high risk. And the rest of the Tri-Cities was itching to get back to whatever normal is.
Right.
And I couldn't. I still had to be at home for like another year and a half.
Wow.
So that's when I found out about Pretty Gritty Tours. And I always have secretly wanted to be a tour guide, especially after I took my students to England and Scotland. And the Scottish tour guides were like next level. And so I thought, well, maybe sometime when I retire or whatever, maybe I can move to Scotland and be a tour guide. And then I thought, they probably want Scottish people.
Right.
They don't want the tourist giving the tour.
I can't even do a good Scottish fake accent. So, but I just never assumed I could do it here in the Tri-Cities because I grew up here. And if you grow up in an area, I think at least when you're young, you think the place is boring. You can't wait to get out, blah, blah, blah. But then when I moved back from getting my undergrad, and then when I saw Chris post he needed local tour guides, I got really excited. And then I was really confused because I'm like, what would we be doing? But now I know, and I absolutely love it. And I'm actually really sad the season's almost over, this tour season with the cruise ships, because that's our main source of tour guests. And I did my last ghost tour in Walla Walla this past weekend. And so I have a big stack of books that I'm going to be reading during off season. And I have a couple projects I want to work on. But I think especially right now, learning history is so important.
Absolutely. Agree.
I never really thought, like, the stuff I learned growing up, like reading the Diary of Anne Frank and learning all this other stuff, I never thought it would be so in my face. I guess that's
So relevant.
Yes,
It
exactly.
is
So
relevant and timely. That's what keeps popping in my head too, because I read that book as well and
Yeah.
been to the Holocaust
Yep.
Museum in Washington D.C. and you learn these
Yes.
things, and it could never happen again.
Right.
Whoa.
I wrote a play about my own family history, which is a whole nother story. But the very short version is my grandma's side hid Jews and they were caught. And then they were thrown into Auschwitz with the family that
Oh,
they hid.
wow.
And they were killed in
Oh,
Auschwitz.
wow. Oh, my
And
goodness.
so I wrote a play about that in college, and I won a scholarship to go like study at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, but like not just
Oh.
the permanent exhibit, like in the archives and everything.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Wow.
So
You have you have the behind the scenes view of that.
I do. And then Sound of Music, like, I really want to do that show again. But I know, like, the way I directed it when I taught high school, like, some of the choices I made with costuming and whatnot, I would not feel comfortable with now just because it is so relevant. And
The holidays sneak up fast, and holiday shopping can be stressful. But with this week's sponsor, Uncommon Goods, you can cross all the names off your list and actually have fun with it. Uncommon Goods makes holiday shopping stress-free and joyful with thousands of one-of-a-kind gifts you can't find anywhere else.
They really do. Uncommon Goods finds things that are high quality, unique, and often handmade right here in the United States. Many come from independent artists and small businesses, so shop early because good stuff sells out fast.
I grabbed the Glitter Heart toilet bombs in Walk in the Woods. They fizz, clean, and make your bathroom smell like a mossy P&W forest. Perfect for that family member who disappears for half an hour after dinner. And I had to get the murder mystery jigsaw puzzles. They look like vintage books, and instead of a picture, you solve the puzzle through a story. When it's done, the clues are hidden right in the image.
And I picked the National Parks water bottle. It's metal, sturdy, and you track every park you visit. I'm making it my life's mission to fill that thing. And for our girls' trip, the Slumber and Serenity Spa Box. Handmade in Colorado with eucalyptus and lavender. It's like heaven.
When you shop Uncommon Goods, you're supporting artists and small businesses.
And they give back. Over $3 million donated to nonprofits so far.
So shop early, have fun, and cross some names off your list today. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/RDRH.
That's uncommongoods.com/RDRH for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer.
Uncommon Goods.
We're all out of the ordinary.
there's stuff going on, like what happens in the play. So, but yeah, I'm a huge nerd and I proudly own that now. So,
well, and you lead tours all across Eastern Washington.
I do.
So you're in Richland, Walla Walla,
Yep.
Sacagawea State Park,
Yep.
and sometimes Pendleton, Oregon even.
Yeah, that one's super fun.
So what's your favorite part about sharing these places with people?
It's a little selfish and not something I was expecting, but every time I give a tour, I fall in love with the area I live more. And I am learning not to take things for granted. Even things like I call them lost gulls because they look like seagulls, but they're at the Columbia River. They're not over by the sea, by the ocean, but land gulls. And people on the bus will ask me, "Oh, what kind of bird is that?" And I'm like, "It's a gull. Like, doesn't everyone have these guys eating their French fries?" But they don't. Or, "Oh, what is that?" "That's a grain elevator." And then you find out they live somewhere where there's nothing like that. Like in Florida, like I have a lot of guests from Florida and they just are like blown away by there's a desert in Washington State. That's always a surprise. So I always apologize when they wake up first day in Washington State. If they're on my side of the state, I'm like, "You're in the Evergreen part of Evergreen State. Sorry."
Evergreen.
Yeah, it's our cheesy tour guide joke, but also learning. I've met so many amazing people, and it's a little sad because I know I'm never going to see these people again ever. But I've met people that have worked on nuclear submarines, and I take my guests during the Richland tour. I take them to a sail of the USS Triton nuclear submarine. I've met a lot of amazing veterans with really amazing and moving stories. Sharon Tate lived in Richland when she was a teenager.
Oh,
and
wow.
And I share that with my guests. And I've met 2 people now that met Charles Manson.
Oh, wow.
I met someone who like owns the energy drink Celsius. I met someone who at the time was on the board of directors at the Kennedy Center pre this year. I'm sure he's probably not there anymore. But
yeah, probably not.
And they're all so nice and so kind. And even they have historians that are on the ship with them. And sometimes those people will also come on the tours. And they're usually older and they're usually men, but they've all been really supportive and not trying to like take up space when it's my time to give a tour, which I've really appreciated. So that was a really long answer, but.
So you've been spending some time on a place with some mystery out there in Eastern Washington. You've been spending a lot of time researching the Hanford nuclear site.
Yes.
So what drew you to that story? Why does it fascinate you so much?
So I am not originally from the Tri-Cities. I was born in Edmonds, Washington, actually, but then traveled a lot when I was younger. But in 1989, my dad was hired to work out at the Hanford site to help with the cleanup process. And so we moved here. And my dad tried to get my brother and I really excited about the stuff he was doing out there when we were younger. And I pretended to be interested because I didn't understand, like, I still don't understand all the science behind it. So I am not going to be able to give you guys a science lesson. I apologize. But I could tell he was really excited about what they were doing out there. He was very proud of the work that they did out there. And he actually worked there for the Department of Energy until the day he died suddenly, almost 8 years ago now. And I realized after that, I didn't know a lot about what my dad had been so passionate about with his work. And so I started looking into that and then combining that with being a tour guide and needing to learn more about Richland, Washington to share with my guests. It's definitely, better late than never, I guess. And I've realized this part of Washington State that's a lot of people don't even realize exists, like for better or for worse, we've changed international history. And I think that's really important for people to find out. And getting really interested in how this was a secret city no one knew of, how they were able to keep this huge secret for so long, just kind of blows my mind. And I think my dad would be, I think my dad's like, finally, right? Like, you finally can explain Hanford.
Oh, now you're interested.
Yeah, now you're interested. Timing's a little off, but
let's dive in and take our listeners inside the dark history of Hanford.
Okay.
As soon as we come back from this quick break. Okay, we are back with Ellicia Elliott, and she is going to take us on a tour of the dark history of the Hanford nuclear site in Eastern Washington.
So excited. Let's go.
Okay, so the Hanford site, as we know now, and the Tri-Cities, especially Richland, Washington, as we know now, did not exist before the 1940s. I do want to recognize that before that, there were indigenous people that have lived here for literally thousands of years. Actually, Kennebec Man, the oldest, most complete human skeleton ever found in North America, who's at least 10,000 years old, was found literally just down the street from my house.
Wow.
And so for a very long time, there were people that lived out in this area, in this desert, but it wasn't known as Hanford. It wasn't known as the Tri-Cities. And then there were also farming towns I'll talk a little bit more about down the road. So the whole idea with World War II, the Manhattan Project, and the atomic bombs, it actually started in 1938 in Germany. I believe it was December, so late 1938. And nuclear fission, again, not a scientist, so I know like the bare bones, but if you're interested, go research more. Nuclear fission was discovered by some German scientists, Otto Hahn, Fritz Strassmann, and Lisa Meitner. Ironically, in 1944, the two guys of the three won the Nobel Prize, but the woman did not, even though they were a trio of people that discovered it together.
Is that ironically, or is that...
I don't know, but I had a student write a play called No Bells. No, and then Belles.
Oh, I love that.
But it's about all these women that should have won the science Nobel Prize, with other people. Anyway, so shout out to Lisa Meitner. They were bombarding uranium with neutrons, and they observed that it split into lighter elements, and that splitting released a ton of energy. And that's eventually what would happen with the atomic bombs. These neutrons would split, causing an explosion, a huge explosion. They also noticed it started a chain reaction. So that's what's happening inside the bombs. that we'll get to in a little bit. It was really important to discover both for nuclear power, which we still use today, and I don't have a problem with, because at least now it's very safe. We have one plant out at the Hanford site that only produces electricity, and it's basically a bunch of really cold water getting heated up really fast, causing energy to happen. But also nuclear weapons, which is what I'll be focusing on the most here. So Germany was planning on making an atomic bomb, and a group of Hungarian scientists and other immigrants, most of them Jewish, that had fled from Europe to the U.S., wrote a letter to FDR in 1939 and said, hey, we need to let you know Germany is trying to put together an atomic weapon, and we think you should probably try to work on one too. And it was co-signed by Albert Einstein to make it legit. So even though we ended up, we, the United States, dropped atomic bombs on Japan, that wasn't the original intent when all this was starting. It was to have an atomic bomb to drop on Nazi Germany if need be.
The intent was, we're doing this in preparation because Germany's developing atomic bombs.
Yeah. And they're already doing a bunch of crap already, and we need to stop them somehow.
Yeah, okay. So not thinking that we were going to be dropping this on the Japanese.
Not at all. Not at first. Nope.
At this point.
Nope.
Okay.
So the Manhattan Project is what this whole plan was called. And when I was younger, I was like, I don't live anywhere near Manhattan. Why is this called the Manhattan Project? Studies at Columbia University, which are in New York, this is where like the initial mind meld of all the scientists and experiments kind of started. And so they've named it after the area where Columbia University is. That's why it's called Manhattan Project.
Okay.
And it was the U.S.'s own nuclear program. They began research in 1939. Depending on where you look at the info, it says that the Manhattan Project officially went from 1942 to either 1946 or 47. So throughout the course of the end of World War II and then after, they wanted to create nuclear fission. They wanted to create all this energy. And one of the most pressing concerns at the beginning was having a steady supply of uranium and plutonium, which is not easy to source or produce, and both can be catastrophic if an accident occurs. So, have you seen the movie Oppenheimer?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay. It's a great movie, and it actually is pretty easy to understand. I was worried I wasn't going to understand some of it. But for any listeners that have seen Oppenheimer, there's 2 glass jars on Oppenheimer's desk throughout the film. One's larger, one's smaller. And the larger one represents Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where the uranium was worked on during the Manhattan Project. And then the smaller one's Richland, where the plutonium was created, because you need a lot less plutonium to be as powerful as a lot more uranium.
Okay.
So these were the 2 main components that were going to be eventually put in the atomic bombs. The 3 main areas, there was a trifecta of areas in the country that were the Manhattan Project. And that was Los Alamos, New Mexico, where Oppenheimer had a ranch. And so he's like, let's do the testing here. It's the middle of the desert. We'll do it here. Oak Ridge, Tennessee was chosen to be the place for the uranium. I don't know much about Oak Ridge. That's a goal of mine to learn during my off season. But then Richland was chosen for the plutonium. And that story is pretty interesting because Colonel Franklin Matthias, he was a civil engineer and an officer, and he was going to be in charge of the Hanford project. So Richland, he stayed up here in Washington State for most of the time. But his boss was General Leslie Groves. Again, if anyone's seen the movie Oppenheimer, that part's played by Matt Damon, if you need a visual. But he had to find a place that had a clean and abundant water supply, a large electric supply, a hazardous manufacturing area of at least 12 by 16 miles, a space for laboratories at least 8 miles from the nearest nuclear reactor or separation plant, the employees' village no less than 10 miles upwind of the plant. Everything had to be upwind, and I'll get to why later on. And no towns of more than 1,000 people closer than 20 miles from this site. Matthias is flying over Washington State, and he sees the Tri-Cities area, which is desert and brown. But he does notice there are farmers here, because after the Homestead Act of 1862, some really gutsy pioneers and farmers moved out here, realized it was desert, but then figured out how to get water from the Columbia River and do irrigation. So there were almost 2,000 white settlers, plus all the indigenous people that did live out here. Matthias is quoted as saying the land was far more promising in terms of meager quality of crops and a shabby look to the ranches in the area.
Your guys' ranches
Your
suck.
suck.
So So they're disposable.
Yeah, exactly.
Expendable.
And he says in a letter to Leslie Groves, he said, "I was pleased the total population was small and most of the farms did not appear to be of any great value."
Oh, thanks, dude.
Mhm.
So the
Screw
house,
you, man.
the house did not look majestic.
Right.
So therefore, there's very little value here. These are definitely
Yeah, they're
shabby.
poor.
Like we're gonna do
farmers.
these poor farmers a favor and get them out of this disgusting area of Washington State.
There's no value to me, so there is no value.
Right.
Exactly. Fun random fact, if you ever come over this way, Matthias's house is still along the Columbia River and you can rent it as an Airbnb.
Oh, wow.
So I've shared that with Chris. I was like, hey, history nerd, if you ever want to come
there-
over here.
Hey, we
Yeah.
gives tours of houses over here all the time.
Yeah, there you go.
I have a quick
At it.
I have a quick question. I recently did an episode on the Grand Coulee Dam, but I don't remember dates. So was this all happening after the Grand Coulee Dam was in place?
Right after. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And so our area was chosen not just because Matthias thought all these farms looked like crap and whatever, but there was a lot of cold, clear water from the Columbia River, and there was an abundant supply of energy from Grand Coulee Dam.
Do you know if when they were building the dam, if this idea was already...
I don't think so. Well, I guess it would depend on who in the Army Corps of Engineers.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
She listens.
I do. The Army Corps of Engineers, like, who knew what? Because only 1% of the people involved in the Manhattan Project actually knew what they were doing, which also blows my mind. But they either knew about it or quickly right after.
Okay.
So the Grand Coulee Dam began construction in 1933 and was completed in 42.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, like right after it was completed, that's when they started moving in here. So I'm sure by the end of the construction, they were aware of that.
Yeah, because I do believe that they were diverting a good portion of the power to the Hanford nuclear site. But I don't know if it was like, okay, before we even finish, we know we're doing this or not.
Yeah, I can't say for sure 100%, but I can try to find
It's
out.
a lot of federal dollars coming this way in that short period of time.
So many, and everything happened so fast. So they get this letter. The brainstorming part, I think, probably took the longest. But then once this area was chosen, there were the 3 farming villages were Hanford, Richland, and White Bluffs. And a lot of local tribes had already been moved to reservations, the Yakima Reservation, Nez Perce Reservation, and then the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Reservation after a treaty signed in 1855. But there were still pockets of Native Americans living in this area as well. And so by March of 1943, using wartime special powers, 2,000 people in the area were resettled. And what that meant was you got a letter from the government. His family was one of those farming families, and he was a baby when their family got kicked off the land. And he still has the letter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like he doesn't remember that happening, but he grew up hearing about it. So they had 30 days to leave, and they did supposedly fair market value. But basically, you need to remember by this point, this is generations of farming families. So they have established crops, livestock, all sorts of things, farms, barns, homes. They have a school out there, they have a bank, and they just have to leave. And so that's when some of the other farming communities, like out by Yakima, Washington and Prosser, Washington, that's when those kind of started because these people needed to go somewhere. And then after everyone left, everything got bulldozed down. I think there's the old Hanford High School is a shell, and it's up in like an old bank, but that's it. They tore down everything. They also tore down everything in the farming town of Richland that they felt wouldn't contribute to the war effort. So that's why Richland, out of the 3 Tri-Cities, Kennewick, Pasco, Richland, we have almost no homes from before 1940s.
Wow.
Everything was torn down. And another interesting thing, something I bring up on my ghost tours, is if you were wealthy enough, even if your house looked like crap and Matthias thought you weren't doing well, if you were wealthy enough, you could pay out of your own pocket to have your family members exhumed from the family burial plots because they weren't ever going to be able to come back to this land. But by this point, there had been generations of families. So those that could afford it had their family members exhumed and taken to Prosser. And there's a whole farming village section of the cemetery there. But if you couldn't afford it, and or if you were indigenous, you just were out of luck. Also, if you were indigenous, you didn't get paid to leave your land. You were just told to leave. So all these people move out. And I think it's important to know that even though maybe they didn't have the prettiest looking homes or whatnot, like they were doing fine and they had figured out irrigation, and now they had to do this to support the war effort.
And they'd figured out irrigation, meaning that they've put a lot of time, money, and effort.
Yes.
That was a lot of manpower to get water to where they needed it. And now, poof.
Exactly.
Move along.
But that irrigation, hey, Manhattan Project.
Oh, thank you for that irrigation. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for getting that set up for us.
For us,
Yes.
we'll just take it from here. Yeah.
Yes.
Us locals call it the site or the reservation or the Hanford site or the Hanford reservation, or sometimes we'll just say out in the area. Do you work out in the area? That's
the area.
We know what that means. It was officially established in January 1942. So as they're kicking these families out, there's a little bit of overlap where the Hanford Engineer Works was starting to at least plan everything, because this was one of the quickest construction projects in U.S. history, probably anywhere in the world. It was insane how quickly this happened. They designated 586 square miles for the Hanford site. So that's about the same size as half of the state of Rhode Island or the city of LA with room to spare. So lots of space. It's desert. So there's only 7 to 9 inches of precipitation per year. That's going to come in. That's going to be important in a little bit. The construction project got underway and ads were sent across the country advertising for a war construction project with an attractive scale of wages and living facilities. And I'll talk about those living facilities in a minute. They did get paid well. And people that were hired, first the construction workers and support workers, but then engineers and scientists, like they were getting paid really well. And they had a lot of incentives that other people during the war did not have. So lots of really good food, plenty of steaks, plenty of turkeys at Christmas, plenty of free entertainment from big name celebrities that got flown in here in the middle of the night and then taken back out. They really wanted to keep the people there. And most of them stayed there, but there were a few other issues.
Yeah, it behooved them to keep them happy.
Exactly.
You don't want disgruntled workers going off and maybe flapping their loose lips about what's going on. You know, real quick, one thing that's interesting is the Grand Coulee Dam project had already displaced thousands of farmers and indigenous people on the other side of the dam. And then here we are doing it again.
The dam.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if the dam hadn't have been there, this project wouldn't have happened there.
Right. Exactly.
So the dam damned the damn desert many damn times.
And all the people were damned. We should do like, how many times can we say damn? And we can make it into a drinking game. That might be dangerous though.
Yeah, when I was growing up, my dad was working on a project on one of the dams up here. And, you know, as a little kid, I just thought it was the best thing in the world that I could say, Dad's going to do his dam job.
Yep. Same. I mean, my dad didn't work at a dam, but at first I was like, oh, you know, I felt like I was getting away with something.
Exactly.
August 1945, by this point, 554 buildings have been built at Hanford. And that included 3 nuclear reactors, 3 plutonium processing facilities, 64 single shell, that's going to be important later, underground waste tanks to be used in chemical separation. And when people first moved out here, a lot of people think, oh, they moved into the Alphabet homes in Richland. They did eventually. But at first, everyone lived at the site, which is also going to be a problem for down the road. But there were dorms, barracks, mess halls, an auditorium, baseball fields, and the world's largest trailer park at the time, over 1,000 trailers. And each trailer, if you were married and had kids, you could get a trailer instead of a dorm. But it fit, this cracks me up, 3.7 people comfortably. So I don't know what happened to the rest of the fourth person.
So either you had some extra room or you were cramped.
Or you're cramped. And it was known as Camp Hanford, and it was a military base. A couple random fun things I share with my guests is the only dorm surrounded by barbed wire was the women's dorm, because the dorms were segregated by race and gender. And at first I was like, excuse me? It was to keep the men out.
Yeah.
So
barbed wire to keep the men out.
That is important. No fraternizing.
Like they're wild animals.
Yep.
So some things have not changed.
No. We need more barbed wire, I guess. But another thing that Oppenheimer was really passionate about was, especially these engineers and scientists, you had to bring the entire family out. So you had to provide schooling, you had to provide social clubs or whatever, because unlike like having someone being sent off in the military to fight in a war, I know I'd have a problem if my husband was like, hey, so I just got hired for this job. I don't know what it is. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know when I'm going to be back. See ya. I'd be like, hell no. So they brought the entire families out there too.
Well, I could imagine too, there would be pressure on those families that were left behind. You know, either pressure could be brought to bear on them. They're more vulnerable. or frustration and disillusionment could cause them to start prying and questioning and talking in a way that would be detrimental to the secrecy of this project.
Exactly. And it still blows my mind how they were able to keep this secret for so long. The newspapers from that time, on the top, it would say like confidential, does not leave area. Like you couldn't, if you were born during this time, either at Camp Hanford or eventually Central Richland, you didn't have that name on your birth certificate. You had like Seattle or Spokane, or this one cracks me up, sometimes a P.O. box.
Oh, wow.
So it was very, very top secret for a long time. Something that they did well out at Camp Hanford, because there were no trees. There was nothing out there. They had torn down all the orchards that had been out there that the farmers had. They used tumbleweeds as Christmas trees. So
wow.
We have photos of tumbleweeds in people's homes with Christmas lights on them.
Oh, I mean, I guess you got to do
what you got to do. I just keep thinking fire hazard, but
they weren't worried about that back then. Remember, the baby clothes were flammable. Right?
No, they weren't worried about radiation back then either.
I mean, we're not far off of the time where they would bathe in radium waters and drink radium
and lithium
water
and all that.
Yeah.
So there was one thing though that would cause people to leave, and it was usually en masse or like in large groups, and these were called termination winds, because we do have a lot of wind here, especially in the spring. And back when there weren't as many trees, it still is a problem, but not as bad. There'd be huge dust storms, and people would be sweeping inches of dust out of their trailers, or they'd have like a bunch of sand in their teeth.
Wow.
And so there'd be something called termination paychecks. And if they were just like, I can't do this anymore, I'm done. First of all, they told me I was moving to Washington State. This is not Washington State. This is not the Washington State I've heard of. They would get their termination paycheck and then leave. So there was a lot of turnover, but the families that like really stuck through with it, a lot of those families are still here. And then eventually people moved to Central Richland, which is a whole nother story in itself. But that's basically, if people visit Richland, Washington on George Washington Way, that is what was eventually created. And all the people were moved off of Camp Hanford and then into this tiny town. The entire reason all these people moved out and all this stuff was happening was to create plutonium. Plutonium was most important, but also most dangerous for the Manhattan Project effort. The B reactor was completed on September 13th of 44, and you can find a bunch of stuff out about it online. It's actually now a museum, and it's part of the Manhattan Project National Historic.
The holidays sneak up fast, and holiday shopping can be stressful. But with this week's sponsor, Uncommon Goods, you can cross all the names off your list and actually have fun with it. Uncommon Goods makes holiday shopping stress-free and joyful with thousands of one-of-a-kind gifts you can't find anywhere else.
They really do. Uncommon Goods finds things that are high quality, unique, and often handmade right here in the United States. Many come from independent artists and small businesses, so shop early because good stuff sells out fast.
I grabbed the Glitter Heart Toilet Bombs in Walk in the Woods. They fizz, clean, and make your bathroom smell like a mossy P&W forest. Perfect for that family member who disappears for half an hour after dinner. And I had to get the murder mystery jigsaw puzzles. They look like vintage books, and instead of a picture, you solve the puzzle through a story. When it's done, the clues are hidden right in the image.
And I picked the National Park's water bottle. It's metal, sturdy, and you track every park you visit. I'm making it my life's mission to fill that thing. And for our girls' trip, the Slumber and Serenity Spa Box. Handmade in Colorado with eucalyptus and lavender. It's like heaven.
When you shop Uncommon Goods, you're supporting artists and small businesses.
And they give back. Over $3 million donated to nonprofits so far.
So shop early, have fun, and cross some names off your list today. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/RDRH.
That's uncommongoods.com/RDRH for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer.
Uncommon Goods.
We're all out of the ordinary.
Park. And my dad really wanted to take us there when they started offering tours. But I was pregnant and I was really nervous because I was like, this was a nuclear reactor, right? Well, they took anything in it that had been, one reason it didn't open as like a museum for so long was huge, just making sure everything's safe. And I trusted my dad. But tours were free, but you have to like sign up online and include your social security number, and they do like a security clearance check, and it's
wow.
But it's really cool. And I really want to go back now that I know even more about this. But ironically, it only took 18 months to build the first reactor, the B reactor, but it's taking 2 years to replace the roof, which is why it's closed right now. So basically what would happen if you look online, there's this huge wall of tubes, full of tubes. And these tubes, they're all kind of like Russian nesting dolls, but they're tubes within tubes within tubes. And in these tubes, you have uranium and aluminum, and that at really high temperatures, plus the cold water from the Columbia River, 30,000 gallons per minute. I'm not exactly sure, again, science, how this all worked, but the end product was weapons grade plutonium.
Wow.
And so the first group, I'm not sure, piece of plutonium was created November 6, 1944. And the first batch of weapons grade plutonium arrived at Los Alamos February 5th, 1945. And then it just goes quicker from that. The Trinity nuclear test was July 16th, 1945. The plutonium from Richland went on a train underneath someone's seat to Los Alamos.
What?
If that train had been hit or crashed...
Like a passenger train with other passengers?
Yep.
Just like in somebody's suitcase.
Yep.
Oh my God.
I know, right?
The carry-on.
Here's my carry-on. And Oppenheimer's quoted as saying, he did not come up with this quote. It's from some Hindu scripture from the 2nd century BCE, but he is known for saying, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," when the tests went off, the bombs went off at the testing site. And then he's also quoted as saying, "We knew the world would not be the same. A few people laughed, a few people cried, and most people were silent." And so the people down at Los Alamos knew before the people in Richland, most of them, what was happening now. And by April 1945, a shipment of plutonium from Hanford was being sent to Los Alamos every 5 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not under somebody's seat, I hope.
I'm not sure, but...
I'm hoping that they came up with a better
I'm
way
hoping
of
so,
it.
but tangent, but I promise it's connected. Again, my guests are always like, what is she talking about? But it's the 50th anniversary of Jaws, right? And there's an amazing monologue in the movie, I think it's Quint, talks about the USS Indianapolis and how that ship was attacked by a Japanese sub and it sunk and a bunch of people died, and then like almost everyone else was eaten by sharks. And I don't know if you've seen that. It's been
30 years since I've seen Jaws. So
yeah, but it's really powerful. And at first I thought he was just making it up. And he said, but he mentions briefly that the material for the atomic bombs was on the USS Indianapolis. And they had to take it to an island close to Japan to put the bombs together to drop on Japan. It was on their way back. They were attacked.
Oh my gosh.
And it was a top secret mission, so no one really knew they were out there, which is why it took so long to rescue them. But then I start thinking, oh my God, what if the submarine had attacked them on the way there?
Yeah.
Like,
then it would have just, all of that would have been in the ocean.
Yeah.
For everywhere.
For everywhere. And also, like the secret would have been ruined at that point too.
Well, also then Hiroshima and Nagasaki would have been bombed, and the world would be a very different place.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
Butterfly wings.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. So the bomb material was eventually brought over to the island outside of Japan. I forgot the name of the island. But on August 6th, 1945, the bomb that was known as Little Boy, which had the uranium from Oak Ridge, Tennessee in it, was dropped on Hiroshima. And then August 9th, 1945 was when the Fat Man bomb was dropped on Nagasaki with the plutonium from Hanford. And when I was younger, I got them confused. I called them Little Man and Fat Boy. I just thought those were like weird names for bombs. So like I mentioned before, only 1% of people at Hanford were aware of what they actually constructed. They all found out when the world found out in the newspapers.
Wow.
And before that, people were told, you're working at a sandpaper factory. You're like, each person had one specific job. So no one knew what the whole process was. And there are people, grown-ups now that were kids that say, I thought my dad worked at a toilet paper factory because he'd come home with a bag of toilet paper at the end of the day, because they had those incentives for families to live out there. So you get free toilet paper. But the kids were like, what's my dad doing all day? Oh, he's making toilet paper. Okay.
Wow. So some people working there didn't even know what they were doing.
Only 1% knew.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine? And I
then
wonder
you
how
find
that
out.
feels after you drop a bomb.
Exactly. Yeah.
In Japan.
And there's no way that could happen today. No way.
Right.
For so many reasons. But
No.
It just amazes me so many people were willing to be quiet and not ask questions. I would not have succeeded because, again, I'm always asking questions. August 15th, 1940.
You would have ruined the whole thing.
I know, I would have ruined the whole damn thing, and we wouldn't be here talking about it today. August 15th, 1945 is when the Japanese emperor announced Japan's surrender, and then the surrender was officially signed September 2nd of 1945. And one of the researchers, I read some of his stuff getting ready for this episode. He's like, and then wouldn't it have been great if everything had been peaceful and we would have moved on? But of course it didn't, because a spy from Russia had infiltrated the Hanford site and took the information about the plutonium and the bomb back over to Russia. And so then Russia started making their own nuclear weapons, and then the Cold War started. And so by 1963, there were 9 nuclear reactors, 5 processing plants, 900 support buildings, and 177 underground tanks. So this small amount, it wasn't really small. It was one of the biggest construction projects ever in U.S. history. But what they had for World War II, they basically almost doubled in size for the Cold War. And from 1944 to 1987, Hanford produced 67.4 tons of plutonium, 54.5 which were weapons grade, and most of the United States' current 60,000 nuclear weapons came from Hanford.
Wow.
Yeah. And it wasn't until the end of the 80s, when the Cold War was fizzling out, that's when my dad got hired to come up here to help with the cleanup. They were starting to think of cleanup, I think, in the 70s and 80s, but going straight from World War II into, oh my God, now Russia has these, oh my God, now we need to make more. Safety wasn't at the top of their list. And even when if you watch the movie Oppenheimer, even down there, they just have a piece of glass over their eyes because they knew the bomb was going to be really bright, the explosion, but they're not wearing any protective equipment. There's no Geiger counter. So most of the reactors closed by 1971. The last one creating any kind of plutonium was shut down in 1987. And all of them except the B reactor, which is now a museum, they've been cocooned in steel and concrete, which in theory, I use a lot of air quotes when I do my tours, will allow radiation to slowly decay. Research says 75 plus years, but the half-life, which is a rate of how the plutonium decays, is thousands of years. So if there are people still here in 2,000 years, there will still be something for them to clean up at Hanford.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the health concerns, all that stuff, people started finally focusing on in the late 80s, 1980s. The Washington State Department of Health and Hanford Health Information Network, which was a citizen-led group, they did a bunch of studies publishing information about those living downriver or downwind that were exposed to radiation poisoning. So remember, the employees, one of the requirements that Leslie Groves gave Matthias was they need to live upriver or upwind. But downriver, down by like Umatilla and Hermiston, Oregon, places like that, that wasn't a concern.
Did they just think it was far enough away that they wouldn't be affected?
Yeah. But you've got all this nuclear waste now in single shell tanks in the ground.
Leaching into the groundwater.
Next to the Columbia River.
Right.
So you mentioned how many salmon were killed and can't exist anymore because of the Grand Coulee Dam. So between the 14 dams on the river and then some of the leaks from Hanford, there's there's still fish, but what they are trying to do now at the Hanford site, which I want to acknowledge, is that there's a lot of work with indigenous groups to replant the native plants that were there, to restock the river with fish. All the 5th grade classes here do a salmon release day where they get a baby salmon in their classroom and they put them in an aquarium, and then they all take them when they're big enough and they go down to the river and they release them. So like there's...
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. So there's definitely some good things happening, but still, there was an increased risk of various cancers, thyroid issues, and birth defects. There were lawsuits, some of the biggest ones in 2005 and 2015, but the damages awarded were low. And so since 1989, 1990, the focus has been cleanup. It's been quoted as being the biggest cleanup operation in history in the world. Like more than Chernobyl, more than these other places.
Fukushima.
Yeah.
Is that because it's necessary or that we're just doing a better cleanup or a bigger cleanup?
I think a little bit of both.
Chernobyl and all that seems like a pretty big cleanup, right?
Yeah.
Are they just not doing it? Or
Well, that is interesting. I can't say for sure, but when we go visit the nuclear submarine during one of our tours, we talk about the core reactors that powered those subs. And due to a treaty with Russia and Japan, these core reactors have to be taken up to Hanford and buried in a trench. But they're not buried. They can't be buried completely because Russia or China, through a treaty, need to be able to fly over at any time to see how many we have.
Oh.
So I have a feeling, at least nowadays, that there is a much more serious intent on cleanup over here, which is one reason why moving here as late as I did, and then what the focus has been on, I feel pretty safe. Like I joke, I don't glow in the dark, at least that I know of. I haven't grown a third eyeball, but people who have been here a lot longer than me, there have been health issues.
Yeah.
Did they ever track the original workers to see what their health outcomes were?
Not really.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine, like, we're talking the 40s.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
50s, like,
family.
that was when the doctor was smoking whilst he was,
right,
next
to the
his
or like the mom, the
choke
pregnant mom was having a martini, whatever.
and a cigarette.
And a cigarette. I remember seeing that on Mad
Right.
Men, and I was just like, what is happening? So the cleanup to present day, every once in a while you'll hear something in the news if something weird happens out there. So for example, 8 years ago, Ronan Farrow actually came out and did a big story on it. BBC's been out here, NPR, PBS, CNN. 56 million gallons of toxic waste, which is enough to fill 85 Olympic-sized swimming pools, is currently left in the underground tanks. So 56 million gallons.
Oh, wow.
It's thought, but we don't know for sure. There's not any way to know for sure. Roughly 4 million liters have already leaked out into the soil and groundwater.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And 300 galleons. They're galleons. 300 gallons.
It made it much nicer if it was galleons.
It would be, right? This is nice. Seep out.
Or ships. I can't remember what a galleon is.
I know, but it sounds better than gallons of,
together.
Seep out every year. And a lot of people that have done these studies have mentioned something about surely authorities in the richest country in the world know how to handle this. And it was being handled pretty well for quite a while until last January.
Yeah.
It's already been 3 decades of cleanup. They think it's going to be another 50 years. But the most recent thing, and I think this is what I was texting to Shea when I was listening to the Grand Coulee Dam thing, because there was this issue with we're going to get some of the dams down. There's going to be more fish, blah, blah, blah. And then there's this project called the vitrification plant, or the VIT plant, which started to be built and worked on in the early aughts. And it is a plant that will take the toxic sludgy waste and combine it with silica and turn it into glass cubes.
Oh, wow.
And then bury them in containers in the ground. And because they're glass, they can't leak.
Right. They won't leach out into the water and the soil.
So it's been a really slow process. It's cost $16.8 billion. It was finally going to go up this year. After like 2010, 2015, 2020, we'll have it starting sometime. And 2 weeks before it was supposed to open, front page news in our paper was the new person in charge of the Department of Energy was stated saying that he didn't think this was going to work and he was canceling it. And
he didn't think it was going to work. And I don't think that there's any necessity to try and, get an expert to weigh in on this. That would be above and beyond. Don't do that.
Right.
I feel it. I think it. I imagine it. Let's do it.
Yeah. And already so many things had been cut from Doge that then till now, it is really scary to live here. Not necessarily just because of the toxic waste, but because places like Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, where my husband works, that haven't really ever experienced massive layoffs, and they've been here for 60 years. People are getting laid off, people are getting furloughed, and these are people that have worked here for 30 years. People out at Hanford, if things don't change in the next week or two, up to, I believe it was 1,300 employees could be laid off. And so the good news is, our state really fought hard. I'm so thankful to live in Washington State, but our senators and our governor and some other people were like, hell no, we are opening the VIT plant. We've already spent $16.8 billion. We are going to do this. And so it did. It opened October 15th.
Oh, wow.
So they're starting to take the toxic.
And now it's not federal dollars. We're going to do it with state dollars now. Is that how it's
I'm not
being
exactly
managed,
sure how that's working. I know that the state is willing to support a little bit, but
well, I know they sued for their federal
Yes.
dollars, so maybe that was part of that. I don't know.
yeah, I need to look into that. But
Mhm.
anything that's environmental or like climate change or anything like that, there's so many. So what's really cool about living here is Hanford started the whole science area thing. And now we have the Tri-Cities Research District. And that's where the national lab is in Hanford. And Richland has the highest percentage of people with PhDs that they've brought in from all over the world to do all sorts of projects like finding cures for different cancers or helping with climate change. Or there was one where a group of people, it was top secret until just about a month ago, had created a way to restore power to like the hospitals and maternity wards and homes in the Ukraine after they'd been bombed. So like really important stuff, but anything that's humanitarian or environmental now does not have funding.
Yeah.
Well, this new Department of Energy guy, Chris Wright, has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and a master's in electrical engineering. But his big thing is he founded the publicly traded oil field services firm Liberty Energy, which fracks 20% of the onshore wells nationally. It's a $3 billion company involved in nearly 10% of the United States total energy production. He said things like, there is no climate crisis, and we're not in the midst of an energy transition either. So this is the guy who is making these decisions, of which he's only going to make decisions that further his bottom line.
You know, one of the comforting things, and I had a little bit of imposter syndrome getting ready for this interview because I know there's a lot of scientists and other people that know way more about like how the actual plutonium was made and everything than I do. A lot of times it's a lot of big science words. And so I'm like, I want people to understand, like, you know, people like me, I want them to understand what's going on. So I kind of have imposter syndrome with that. But let me tell you what, this past year, any other imposter syndrome I've had for not being qualified enough to do something has completely flown out the window.
I mean, Ellicia, you could be in charge of the Department of Energy.
I could. Oh my God, could you imagine my dad's reaction?
At this point. Oh my God.
They'd be like, what? Who? What? I remember when the main person for the Department of Energy came out, and my dad and his friend had been working on some sort of virtual reality project. So again, it's not just like, oh, we have to clean up. The main thing's cleaning up the waste out at Hanford, but like, can we train people to do cleanup through virtual reality? And this was like in the 90s. Can we do this? Can we do that? And a couple of times the main person of the Department of Energy would come out and meet with my dad and his coworkers, and just thought that was the coolest thing. And now, but there is still a lot of stuff that is unknown about the Hanford area. Definitely a lot of people were displaced. A lot of people died. A lot of land was ruined. We joke that the elk are so big out at the Hanford site because of the radiation. It's a mixed bag. I always explain to my tour guests that, you know, I'm not on Facebook anymore, but when I was, you could mark your relationship, married, single, or it's complicated. And I always tell my guests, I'm like, it is complicated because there's still a great sense of pride by many people in this area. Like, hey, we helped end World War II, right? The school I taught at, Richland High School, their mascot's the Bombers. And it's supposed to be after the bomber airplane because all the Hanford workers at one point donated a day's pay to purchase a bomber airplane. And so that airplane was called the Day's Pay. However, that's not the mascot logo on our stuff. It is a mushroom cloud.
It's very poor taste.
And the football helmets used to, I hope they don't anymore, used to say nuke 'em till they glow. And this is like considered normal here in Richland. If anyone else in Richland's listening to this, they're probably going to send you messages, and I apologize. But I grew up in Kennewick, just like down across a bridge, right, from Richland. I was a Kennewick Lion. I'm like, cool, lions are fierce, whatever. And I move here, and it's like bombers. And I'm like, this makes me feel uncomfortable. Am I the only one that makes this?
Yeah.
And the first time I took students to Seattle on a field trip, I wanted them to wear Richland High gear so I could find them, right? In field trip, and people started yelling at them, and then I went, oh crap, like this is upsetting a lot of people.
Gosh.
And then I'm stuck in this place where I understand the scientific discovery and the pride in helping end a war, but like my dad worked out in the area, but I also have an uncle whose family was in internment camps. And there are people here trying really hard to be a sister city, there we go, with Nagasaki. And like, this was just, they think math. the 80th. I don't like the word anniversary, but like acknowledging it's been so many years since 1945 that the bomb dropped. But there's still a lot of pride that I feel can be kind of toxic. And
Oh, for sure.
so not only is some of the ground toxic, but like some of the attitudes around here are toxic. And
Well, I think people forget
yeah,
the human lives lost because it wasn't Americans.
exactly.
You know, that they think that the 150 to 250,000 Japanese people, most of them innocent
Yes.
civilians that had no stake in the war other than the fact that they lived there.
Right.
That is a just fine price to pay. And so being proud of that, I don't think you should be proud of having a part in killing that many people. Maybe saying, you know, things could have been a lot worse. I guess that's the idea.
Yeah.
But it's still the people, the death toll is not something to mock with nuke them till they glow. Like, I think that's disgusting, personally. Sorry to everybody in Richland, but that's just
and like I said, I don't
me.
think that's on anything anymore, but the mushroom cloud is. Now, before the bombers, they were the beavers. And when I taught at Richland High, one year the ASB made these cute little like stuffies or stuffed animal beavers in a bomber outfit, like a pilot bomber outfit.
Oh,
Like,
right,
why
right.
can't we do that? That's amazing.
That's cute.
So
Yeah, 'cause
they
then
were the beavers. When did they become the bombers?
After, so Richland High's been around
Before the bomb.
And it was
Okay,
Columbia
got it.
High. And I don't know exactly the year, but after the bomb was dropped and everything like that. And then they used to have Atomic Frontier Days. There's some amazing podcasts that people had come into Richland a few years back and actually like recorded the parade and some other things and I was just kind of, it's still, I've lived here most of my life now and I'm still kind of just, I can't wrap my head around it. And it's really interesting to share it with people from all over the country, sometimes even all over the world when they come here for tours.
I think it's it reminds me of like the Confederate flag.
Yes. Yeah.
Like we're proud of that. I mean, I was in the South a couple of years ago for a wedding and it was held at a plantation and the bridal suite was where they kept the slaves. In fact, I said, "This is a weird house." And they said, "Oh, this is where we used to keep our slaves." And I was like, "We used to what?" Yeah. And now we're making this this is a venue. Yeah. But much like you, like, oh, the bombers, what are we doing? I was much shocked, but I think that we have pride in our wins. I guess that wasn't really a win. They lost that war. But to not acknowledge how you got there is just, or why you were there is, it's really gross. Like Shea said, you can have some pride without being so crass. And to totally ignore human life because it doesn't look like you.
And it's interesting. Yeah, because they don't live here, or maybe they don't look like some of us. The numbers just astronomical. And then I think Shea mentioned, or maybe it was Jody, you said something about like most of those people they were living in Japan. Like they had no control over what their government was doing.
Right.
And I feel that way a lot now. Like, people hate us.
Hate us.
And could do anything.
The Canadians don't hate us.
Yeah,
Canadians.
we love the Canadians. We love you, especially in Washington State.
I'm so sorry.
I know.
I never saw that coming, actually. Out of all the things I panicked about on November 5th last year, attacking the Canadians was not on my
There's
list.
a lot of stuff that was not on my bingo card where now I'm kind of like, who the hell knows?
Yeah.
So,
I'm headed to Japan in a couple of weeks.
Oh, cool.
And, Captain Cankles is just there.
I know.
And there were protests, Japanese people protesting
I saw that.
him being there. And I felt really good about that. I
Me
don't know when I go over there and I say, America Jindis, what kind of reaction I'm going to get. Do I need, I should learn how to say, learn how to say, I don't like.
Just wear a shirt that says
just
FDT.
Trump-san Suki Janaides, I guess.
American, but not proud.
Yeah.
American, but
or should I just go over there and say, Canada Jindis?
I mean,
didn't vote for this.
If you add a to the end of some of your sentences, I think you can do it.
Canada Jindis, eh?
Yeah, there you go.
Toriaizu nama biru onegai shimasu, eh?
I think you're ready.
Does that work?
You're good. Yeah.
I like that. You have a plan.
I do have a plan. Yeah. In fact, I should pick up a Canadian flag patch to put on my backpack.
There you go.
Yeah. a hat, a shirt.
Yep.
Make sure you've got it.
I just wear big maple leaves everywhere.
I think that's a great plan.
Oh, man. Well, Ellicia, I appreciate you giving us the story. I have learned so much today. This has been absolutely fascinating. It's a little bit sad and terrifying that this takes place in our state. The massive death toll that came from that. And not even to mention like the massive toll on the indigenous people, on the environment, and that's all. It's very disheartening. It's heartening to hear that there was a big cleanup effort. It's disheartening to hear that it's been curtailed. So it's ups and downs, man.
Well,
but
I did. If I did not, I'm so sorry. The VIT plant did actually open October 15th.
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's still.
Oh, it did.
Yeah,
Okay,
it did.
good.
It's just
Good.
now
The
everything
state stepped in.
Yeah.
Its funding is
right now
cut.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So, but
okay.
but no, I agree. Yeah, there's a lot. And that's just like, that's just a tiny bit of all of it. So
when we were planning to make America great again, we meant when the nuclear reactor was leaking and
yep.
Let's go back there.
That's when we want to go. Okay.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yep. Good.
Poisoning people is fine as long as it's profitable.
Let's go back to that.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what we're back to.
Yeah.
Yay!
No, let's all go get a glass of wine or something.
Canadian gin this.
It's the only way to survive.
I know.
Well, Ellicia, I really appreciate you coming on and telling us this story. Can't wait to meet you in person. Maybe Jody and I need to take a road trip.
I was thinking
when
I was listening to you, Ellicia, I was like, I need to go do one of her tours. I could listen to her all day long.
Thanks. Well, I guess it is. I mean, I do talk too much, so I guess this is the perfect job for it.
Yeah. Question for you. How far are you from Prosser?
25 minutes.
Perfect.
Depends who's driving.
Prosser.
Yeah, Prosser's awesome.
So we'll have to do this in person. And again, if next time you come out to this side of the mountains, let us know.
I would love that.
For sure.
I would love
and
that.
Definitely you can check out one of Alicia's tours with Pretty Gritty Tours. Do you give tours with any other tour companies or just Pretty Gritty?
Pretty Gritty. And what we're doing right now is I kind of called our ghost tours and stuff sort of a soft launch because it takes people a while over here to know there's stuff going on. And so people are like, oh, a ghost tour? A what? So what we would love to do is do more local tours. And what people can do is they can go to prettygrittytours.com. There's a Tri-Cities tab and there's some different options. There may not be like a specific date set on the calendar, but if someone's like, hey, I'm going to be in Richland on this date and I would love to visit some wineries. Do you have a tour that you could put together for me and my group of friends? That's kind of what we're doing right now. And then once, more people find out about us over here, I'm hoping doing some more local tours and getting other local people or people within our state excited about what is here would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
And you can always email Pretty Gritty Tours. It's just prettygrittytours@gmail.com. So if, like she was saying, if you go to the website, there's not a tour on the date that you're looking for, email prettygrittytours@gmail.com and you can get a tour set up. But definitely, if you're going to be in the area, check out a tour with Ellicia.
Yeah.
If they're anything like this, I know they're going to be awesome.
Oh, thanks.
So your love of history really shines through. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you want to plug anywhere else that people can follow you or find out what you're doing?
I am on social. I'm on Instagram. I should clarify. I'm on Blue Sky and Threads and Instagram at Ellicia Elliott, but we should include that in the notes for this episode because my name is spelled really interestingly.
Yes, I'll put this in the show.
And then I also have my theater artist website is ElliciaElliott.com, and on there's, what my career up to this point has been, and there's some bunch of different projects that I've done. So if you're into theater and want to connect that way, you can always visit my website as well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ellicia.
You're welcome.
Thank you to our listeners. Thank you again to Letha Davis, who has made our gorgeous website.
It's amazing.
And she told us to go ahead and send you to a different website because now she's built a website for websites. And it's easybreezy.com. That's EASYBRZY. So easybreezy.com. if you guys are looking for a beautiful website like ours. And thank you to Logan Hine for all of the social media work. That's Logan Hine at redemptionindustries.com. And definitely check out our social medias. We're ramping up on our social media and our YouTube page. And you'll start actually seeing our faces on some things soon. Maybe if we can figure out how to edit video.
Right. You say yay, we say ugh.
That's so much work.
It is a lot of
we thought we were going to be anonymous when we started this, remember?
And people are like, people need to see your faces.
Yeah, it's a thing.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We will see you next time.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.